everyone. We're going to start soon again with the rest of our speakers and panels. Yeah. So, as you've heard, there's been a lot of challenges and nuances and really fascinating developments in the world of psychedelics. I don't know if any of you know, but the California Senate recently passed a bill to basically create a new profession for psychedelic assistive facilitators. You've heard a lot about clinical research. You heard a little bit about churches and a lot of in betweens where people are wanting to create businesses around these substances, but they're not allowed to. And we have examples from Colorado and Oregon that are trying to create a regulated market for psilocybin. In Colorado, for example, they have a model that will also allow not just a regulated market that they're developing, but also for sharing and gifting for personal use. In California, if the bill gets passed by the assembly and then signed by the governor, we might have a new regulatory system that allows people to help facilitate psychedelic experiences so that it's not just relying on medical doctors or going to the to medical professional to get their treatment, because I think in the world of psychedelics it's a little bit of, there's the religious aspect where you find the churches, you have the clinical research as well, there's a lot of in between, and really depends on what is allowed and what is legally defensible. There are a lot of really smart and creative entrepreneurs that are creating a lot of different ventures, companies, businesses. They're starting up and they're emerging in this space. And sometimes it goes beyond just working with the substances, because there's a lot integrating the experience afterwards. And as these businesses are growing, we need a lot of creative, smart entrepreneurs to kind of take the lead and kind of cultivate and build and develop this industry into one that is conscious of just our own human development, the society's development, but also is kind of like what the spirit of these substances are teaching us. And I want to introduce someone who can speak more to that. His name is Brejcha. He is a startup executive coach who partners with CEOs and founders to navigate complex leadership challenges, build high performance teams, and identify leadership blind spots. Ray brings a wealth of firsthand entrepreneurial experience as a two-time startup founder himself. His deep understanding of the dynamics of business growth is further enriched by over 20 years of experience in Silicon Valley SaaS sales, sales generating upwards of $80 million in revenue. With close to 20 years dedicated to exploring and applying psychedelic insight in leadership development, Ray offers a deeply informed perspective that uniquely enhances his coaching approach. In his personal life, Ray is an avid cyclist, snowboarder, and winemaker. As a fun fact, he even competed on the TV show American Gladiator. It is yours, Ray.
I've done talks before, and that's the only thing they remember is American Gladiator. So let's throw that in there. Nice to see you all. Thanks for taking time out of your busy day to be here. It's an exciting topic, and there's a lot of stigma. So if you'd asked me 5 years ago, I'd be talking about something that's not legal, but yet still powerful. I'd have said, "What are you kidding me?" So I'm here to talk about really the potential for human optimization, for healing, spirituality, and how I've seen these tools. I consider psychedelic a tool. Many tools you can work with. Tool for evolving your leadership, become a better human, working with your nervous system in a more regulated way. There's all kinds of practical applications using this as a tool. So before I get started, I've not met you all. I'm familiar face, great. I don't really like speaking much. Faces. So just by show of hands, when you hear the word psychedelic, and you imagine yourself using them, what comes up? Feel nervous, concerned, worried? Anyone? Or when you hear the word psychedelic, you feel excited, curious. Okay, that's good news. I'm in the right place then. I'm not a neuroscientist, so I like to use metaphors. Some of you may have heard this before. but I like to think of psychedelics with a snow metaphor. I know we're in San Diego, so why am I using snow as a metaphor? It doesn't work with surfing, so indulge me. So I like to snowboard. I went to Utah for about 7 weeks this winter, snowboard, and I got 30 days in, and I'll get to the point here, but I love powder. And if you were a skier or snowboarder in the crowd, anyone? Okay, you love powder, right? When you're on a mountain full of powder, there's anything possible. There's no tracks laid down. You can go wherever you want. It's blissful. You can't stop smiling. That's why you get to the first chairlift. Well, after a couple hours of that powder being skied on, there's grooves, there's tracks. There's no longer that powder unless you go in the trees. So those grooves in this metaphor with psychedelics, think of your mind as this fresh blanket of snow where anything's possible. There's no beliefs, there's no rigid thought patterns. Anything's possible. You can go in any direction, like you can on a mountain with powder. And think of these ruts that happen when you ski or snowboard. They become grooves where after a while, even if you want to find fresh tracks, you find yourself in these ruts that are already there. After the end of the day, you've been in these ruts all day long. And so what I like to talk about with psychedelics is think of psychedelics when you use them as a fresh blanket of snow. Your mind opens up. It's all possible. Certain parts of your brain start communicating that are not possible when you're not on psychedelics. It opens up new pathways, new possibilities. You can see your life in a new light. You can have conversations you never thought you'd have. There's a lot more possible. When your mind is not flexible, when it's rigid, it can lead to things like depression, anxiety, there's PTSD. These rigid thoughts in a rigid brain can lead to all those mental health conditions. So what I want to talk about today are three main points with my 30 minutes here. It'd be hard to cover that in 30 minutes, but there's three main points. And again, I'm coming from the lens of human optimization, spirituality, and I'm not a neuroscientist, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a doctor, but I've been working with psychedelics for 20 years personally, and most recently with entrepreneurs who are interested in exploring this as a tool. And what I'll say is my journey started 20 years ago. National Geographic Adventure, I was in a coffee shop looking for an adventure vacation, and I saw this article that said shamanic therapy to hell and back. I'm like, all right, you got my attention. So I read that thing, and I don't remember the exact content of it, but I was a mixture of like, oh shit, are you kidding me? I've been doing therapy. I was in a men's group, trying to just heal and grow, become a better person. At the time, I had just left my first time leaving the Silicon Valley. It's very stressful. Sales in Silicon Valley, stressful. I was burnt out. I was getting sick at the end of every sales quarter. And I was like at the end of my rope. It was meaningless. I had chased success and money to no end. So no matter how much money I made, how much I accomplished, there was never enough. I got stuck in that rut. And so it felt very lonely, felt isolating. I was like, this is what I signed up for. This is life. This is got the car, got the house, the money, and I'm 25, 30 years old. So I couldn't imagine this was it. So I read that article. Something deep inside scared me and spoke to me. And what it talked about was this person went down there. They had depression. They were on anti-anxiety medicine. They were on anti-depression medicine. Not my situation, but it talked about after 2 or 3 journeys with ayahuasca that they never needed to use those medications again. And I was like, how the hell is that possible? I never heard about ayahuasca. I never even heard of a shaman, but that article just, it lit up inside of me. So next thing you know, a month later, I'm in Cusco in Peru, going down the Sacred Valley, and I'm getting ready to drink this medicine. And anyone know ayahuasca? Everyone dance with it? Okay. It's hard to explain unless you do it yourself, but it has DMT, which is one of the most hallucinogenic compounds on the planet. You see things that are otherworldly. You're like, how the hell is that coming out of my brain? You purge. It's a really unpleasant experience. But it's also one of the most beautiful. So I said, well, I'll give it a go. When the shaman was explaining what's about to happen to you, I literally felt dread in my body. I was like, my whole nervous system was like, this is not excitement. This is total fear, because he painted a picture of like, you are going to purge. You are going to see things about yourself you're not going to like. You're going to be sitting in that for hours on end. So imagine doing, if you've not done ayahuasca, imagine doing, they say, 10 hours of psychotherapy in 6 hours, looking deeply inside of yourself. I was not too excited about that. It turns out it was quite a surprise. But that experience changed my life. And that's why I'm talking here today. I went from chasing success to finding success in myself. And I literally touched this. You was here this thing, unconditional love. I never really knew what that was. Uh, I had this thing called imposter syndrome. You may have heard of it as an entrepreneur. That was living deep inside of me. But when I took that medicine, not only did I feel this relief in my nervous system, I felt energetically about 30, 40 pounds lighter, but I felt this deep sense of peace that I had never felt ever before. Being on a mountain, uh, going on vacation, this deep sense of peace that wasn't externally referenced. And I was like, what the hell is this? And then by the end of the ceremony, because I'm the typical American who wants more, who wants insights, I drank 4 cups of this stuff until the shaman was like, no more medicine. And I was like, all right, but I came all the way from California. I need an insight. Uh, and that insight came. And when the ceremony was over, it was probably 2 a.m. And the shaman said, okay, ceremony is over. You can talk now. You can just sleep. And I started laughing uncontrollably. And his wife, who was about this tall, came and sat on my lap and said, you are full of so much love. And I'm like, holy shit. I was onto something with this medicine that is illegal in this country and in most parts of the world, but it just changed my whole life. It was at that moment, it's not only, it does 3 things. It helps you heal medical conditions, potentially. It'll help you heal trauma from childhood or just life traumas, getting fired, divorces. And it also helps give you clarity of vision. And I had never had a real clear vision. I just said, well, you work hard, you get a job, you make money, mortgage, college, all that stuff. So my version of success was someone else's. But on that journey, I saw myself helping others. I saw myself speaking and talking about this. I saw myself teaching. I had no idea what that was. I was like a mannequin up there, but I saw myself doing something different. And that inspired my life in a different direction. And I started working with the plants for over 20 years now. And they've changed my life. And so I want to share what I've learned from that experience, and also how I help work with entrepreneurs like yourself that are, feeling up against the wall. You've got issues around trying to get funding for your company. You're self-funded. You're working with a co-founder. There's so many pressures on you as a startup founder or an entrepreneur that are hard to navigate. So I found ways to help, again, as a tool to help support people with that, help you find a path that's not skied over, it's of least resistance to help you regulate your nervous system and live a bigger life. So with that said, there's 3 things I want to talk about. The first, we've talked about that, like when I first saw the slide about DEA Schedule 1, I said, well, I can't start a church. I can't microdose. What can I do? I'm kidding, but there's a lot of fear and stigma around psychedelics. And there's also a reputation for it being used for partying. Like there's that whole, the hippies counterculture thing, 60s, 70s, people dropping acid, going crazy. I remember like in the 80s when MDMA became a popular party drug. You remember that, I'm going to date myself, but during the Reagan administration, there was that frying pan. This is your brain on drugs, like crispy, crispy, crispy. Like I can still remember that to this day. 20 years later, knock on wood, my brain is not fried. I'm not wearing a white jacket with buckles, and I'm here to talk to you. So it's all good so far. I don't want to minimize that there are risks. I'm not trying to, make it simple, but it's been so demonized that I can imagine that, people you tell them coming to a conference here, like, oh, psychedelics. Everyone has a point of view on it. Some people are friendly about it. Some are like, it's still taboo. There's still a lot of taboo aspects of psychedelics. So there's that. That's the one part of it. The second part, there's a lot of really helpful applications. You've seen some in the clinical world. I'm not going to cover that. But when I went to my last psychedelics conference, I was encouraged that there are at least, this is 2 years ago, I went to one. There's at least 100 universities and teaching hospitals that are doing psychedelic research to help address various aspects of mental health. I was very encouraged by that. There's a lot of clinical trials. So in order for psychedelics to ever become legal, it has to be legitimized through the lens of clinical trials and safety and therapy, which I'm a big advocate for. But there's also things outside of that model, which is where I spend most of my time, that you can still do things safely, mitigate risk, optimize who you are as a human, become happier, healthier, be able to navigate fear, to work with imposter syndrome. We have a lot of pressures in our life. There's a lot of intensity in the world. So I found a way to use them that's safe and effective. So there's that use case. There's also now a lot of press with professional athletes using them. Like Aaron Rodgers came out. There's some hockey players that have had major brain injuries. They've been using psilocybin for those brain injuries. I actually got the pleasure of working with a Major League Baseball player, and I guided a journey for him. And he was one of my first clients. And I was like, what's a guy making multi-millions a year on TV, pro athlete? Like, what the hell could he be worried about? And those people have immense pressure, like a startup founder. And as I started talking to him about his path, his journey, sure enough, things came up on his past about childhood. Simple things like his mom ignoring that he had a stomachache or he broke his arm. So he learned in that imprinting as a child that, oh, I can't speak up and say something's wrong with me because mom's going to ignore it. So his whole life, he ignored his body. So fast forward, now he's making multi-millions. He's on the baseball field. And every season, he kept getting injured. And he was starting to get depressed and anxious because he's like, my career's over. I'm letting down my teammates. I'm miserable at home. I'm just miserable. So we started talking together. I said, why do you want to sit with the medicine? Why do you want a journey? He's like, I want to know why I get hurt every single season. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't party. I do my family. I do baseball. I train hard. I get hurt every single year. I said, all right. I'm thinking, there's no guarantee you're going to get that. But when we did the work together, at the end of our time together, he sat there and laid peacefully. When people do these things, you've done them yourself probably, lay there. It looked like you couldn't tell what's going on in their world. They're just laying there peacefully. But when we were done, we talked about it. He said, I figured out why I got hurt. I said, really? Tell me. He said, I got hurt because my mom didn't listen to me. And so I wouldn't listen to me. So when a trainer told me that I was good to go play, he's like, baseball's a business. If you don't get out there and play, they'll replace you with somebody else. So I didn't listen to my body. I listened to the trainers, and I would go back in and I'd injure myself time and time again. He said, I also saw in the journey that the training I've been doing, when I first started doing my training routine, I was in my 20s, my body could handle being in a batting cage for 5 hours. Now I'm in my 30s, I can't do that anymore. So on a journey, he actually created his own training program with his team. I'm like, this is so fucking profound. I'm like, who knew, right? We did talk about his childhood, but he saw like that fresh blanket of snow. He's been an athlete his whole life. He never saw a different possibility. And so that's the power of this medicine. If you have someone you work with, you do a structured set and setting, you take your time to understand the risks, you educate yourself. He did a lot of education. He's never done quote unquote a drug ever in his life. So for him, he wanted to make certain it was the right path for him. So for him, he saw a new path forward. I talked to him recently. He had another kid. He's healthy. He's playing again. And he's just on his way. So I've got countless examples of entrepreneurs who have run companies where this one guy I worked with, he came to me during the pandemic. He had a factory making this natural product, and part of the factory burned down, burning all of his inventory. And then his wife gets diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. And then his insurance company won't cover some of his inventory and he can't meet orders. So he's like, I have no idea what's next. His car got repoed. He's got 2 kids. His wife's got cancer and he's got no product to sell. So he was at his wit's end. And I'm sure you felt some of those pressures in your business when your back's against the wall, you don't see a path forward. So with our work together, he went deeply into like all of that to feel the intensity and the pain of his wife almost dying, his business imploding. You get to sit with that, not avoid it, but sit with that. So he's not checking out, he's not partying, he's going deep inside his nervous system to help soothe himself and feel good about, yeah, I've got some tough decisions to make, but I can, 5 minutes. Holy cow. Well, I'll get to my next point. See, I could talk about this for 2 hours. So the next point I'll talk about. So the other use case is working with entrepreneurs. Like I said, there's an application for entrepreneurs. That's how I spend most of my time. Most of the clients I work with from an executive coaching standpoint on leadership behavior and managing teams has nothing to do with psychedelics, but there's a small population of people I do work with that are open to that path, and they've gotten some amazing results. So I'm excited about that, and I'll share more about that later. But the other use case or the other application I want to talk about is just the fear and the risks of psychedelics. To talk about the risks of psychedelics, that's a whole other conversation. But people, if you pick a guide and work with a guide, they will help you understand the risks. There's risks around like what mental health conditions you might have, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, any history of that. And there's all kinds of contraindications with SSRIs. So a good guide will help you understand those risks. I work with a medical team, I work with a psychiatrist, I work with a pharmacologist, and to understand like take some of those risks out. And then there's also just the fears. The fears I hear people commonly say. I spoke to an EO group, 7 CEOs, and they had me on as a psychedelic expert in Montreal. And the common question these CEOs had was like, what about having a bad trip? Like, what if I go to Alice in Wonderland and I can never come back? And that was really the legitimate question. And I said, well, the first question I asked is like, okay, I don't know any of you, but what's your experience with drugs? We went around the room and asked, and most of them had a recreational experience with psychedelics. And when you hear bad trips, it's because someone gave them a handful of mushrooms, they went to a concert and they got spun out, or they gave them a big, didn't know how much it was, where it came from. I hear that commonly with bad trips. So if you get medicine from a safe, and the other one is, hey, the other fear is like, hey, if you give me medicine, is it tainted with fentanyl? Am I going to die from this? That's another concern. And then the third fear is like the stigma. Like imagine like these CEOs I've worked with, they go out to their company, they're not telling the CFO, they're not telling people on their leadership team because there's a stigma. There's a big stigma around psychedelics. So those are the three fears I commonly hear. And I can talk, and I talk more through those fears when people are, if they're ready to talk a deeper conversation around it, I'll happily spend hours talking about all those stuff. Because what I want to impart on you is like, psychedelics are not the magic answer. They're not for everyone, and they're just a tool, right? You can go into expanded states with allotropic breath work. DMT in the body gets activated. You can do meditation retreats. There's all kinds of ways to get there to become more aware, more conscious. But in my experience, psychedelics with structure, guidance, and coaching or therapy around it can have really transformative effects. It can change your life. It can open your mind to new possibilities. And you can have a fresh blanket of snow and carve your own path. So that's, again, a half hour. I couldn't talk about as much as I wanted to. I would love to continue the conversation. If you have any questions at all, you don't believe what I said, you want to challenge me, whatever you want, I'm here. I put up one slide. I don't publicly market what I do just because of the legality of it. And I do it only in a place where it's legal when I do work with clients. But I'll put up a QR code. It takes you to a website I had just put up for this event. If you want to talk about it more, you can schedule time with me. There's a little white paper I'm giving out. And in about a week or so, one of the CEOs I've worked with the last year, it talked about his journey, his psychedelic journey from CEO to transformational leader. And he had all the issues that typical founders have about uh, getting money from venture capitalists. In his private equity firm, he had a runway of 3 months, then he had a runway of 2 months, then 1 month. He had people he had to fire. There was constant challenges daily, and it talked about his journey of utilizing psychedelics as a way to stay on course, stay grounded in his reality, stay positive, stay calm. And it's a very fascinating conversation. So if you provide your email, I don't do email newsletters. I'll give you the copy of that recording once it comes out. So let me just show you a QR code. That's it. And my LinkedIn profile is there too. So, but thank you so much for being part of this conversation. It's an important one. Thank you for your time and energy.